It's March 2nd, and on this day in 1974, it was one of the greatest comebacks in college basketball history. This game featured the fourth-ranked North Carolina Tar Heels against an unranked Duke Blue Devil team. It was more than a bit of a surprise that with 17 seconds to play in the game, Duke was up 8 points on the Heels' home court. Bobby Jones made a couple of free throws to cut the deficit to 6. The Tar Heels then stole the inbound pass, and John Kuster's layup made it a 4-point game. On the next inbound play, the Blue Devils could not get it in again, and it bounced off a Duke player, and the Tar Heels had the ball again. Bobby Jones hit a quick layup to cut the lead to 2. Duke was finally able to get the ball into Pete Kramer, who was fouled immediately, but he missed the front end of the 1-and-1. North Carolina rebounded the miss and called timeout. Here's the former voice of the Tar Heels, Woody Durham, with a call of what happened next.
Shaq will make the long front court pass. Gets it to Walter Davis. 2-1. Walter takes the shot.
Walter Davis's banked-in 30-foot shot only tied the game. This was about a decade before the three-point shot was implemented, or that long-range prayer would have won it for the Heels. The Tar Heels kept the momentum in the overtime, and they won 96-92. On this day in 2012, Bountygate was revealed, pulling the curtain back on the dark side of the NFL. ESPN's Adam Schefter was the first to report on this day that the league had found evidence of a bounty program run by the New Orleans Saints, paying players out of a slush fund to injure opposing team players. Saints defensive coordinator Greg Williams organized the pool of money with upwards of 27 players involved in the scheme. The program was originally traced back to the 2009 NFC Championship game that involved the Saints and the Minnesota Vikings, but it stretched back even further. But the 2009 NFC title game raised suspicion. New Orleans won 31-28 in overtime. After the game, Vikings coach Brad Childress believed there was intention to hurt Vikings quarterback Brett Favre on more than 10 occasions in that game. The owner of the Vikings, Ziggy Wilf, went to Commissioner Roger Goodell accusing the Saints of intentionally trying to injure his players. In 2010, former Saints defensive coach Mike Cerullo tipped off the league that there was a program in place to pay players money for certain plays made during a game, pointing the finger at Williams as the ringmaster. But players were also involved in adding money and bounties to the pot, anywhere between $1,000 to $2,000 paid for knocking a player out of a regular season game, and as much as $10,000 for taking a player out in a playoff game. Saints linebacker Jonathan Vilma offered $10,000 to any player who knocked Favre out of that NFC Championship game. Other players targeted by the Saints between 2009 and 2011 were Carolina Panthers quarterback Cam Newton, Green Bay's Aaron Rodgers, San Francisco's Alex Smith, and Kurt Warner of the Arizona Cardinals in the 2009 playoffs. And it wasn't just quarterbacks. Key players like receivers and running backs also had bounties on their heads. 49ers quarterback Alex Smith, tight end Vernon Davis, wideout Michael Crabtree, and specifically running back Frank Gore were mentioned by name in audio released in 2012 by a documentary filmmaker.
Everything in the world to make sure we kill Frank Gore's head. We want him running sideways. We want his head sideways.
Saints head coach Sean Payton knew about the program and attempted to cover it up during the NFL's investigation into the allegations. General manager Mickey Loomis also had knowledge of it and even disregarded owner Tom Benson's directive to shut it down. Even Reggie Bush's agent Michael Ornstein was familiar with the program and actually contributed money to the pool. There were allegations that Williams didn't start the program in New Orleans, but that he brought it with him from his time with Washington and the New York Giants in the early to mid-2000s. Williams said the bounty program had been in the NFL for decades, that it wasn't just a new thing that he came up with. Goodell suspended Williams indefinitely in 2012, but he was reinstated in 2013 and hired by Tennessee. He's since spent time with the Rams, the Browns, and the Jets, and is currently coaching in Washington, with the UFL's DC Defenders. Payton was suspended for the entire 2012 season. GM Mickey Loomis was suspended for the first 8 games of 2012, defensive assistant Joe Vitt for the first 6 games. The organization was fined $500,000 and forfeited their second-round draft picks in the 2012 and 2013 drafts. The players, linebackers Jonathan Vilma and Scott Fujita, along with defensive ends Anthony Hargrove and Will Smith, were suspended from between 3 and 16 games, with Vilma's penalty the heftiest. Prior to the start of the season, the suspensions were overturned but were then reinstated in October, only to be overturned again in December. So, what to draw from this scandal? Well, was it like Williams said, and that programs like this existed all around the league for decades? 2 of the supposed targets, Favre and Kurt Warner, thought so, and they weren't really shocked or even upset by the findings. And also, if there was a bounty gate system in place to injure players and the players themselves believed it to be there, would the statistics prove more injuries were caused by Saints players in 09, 10, and 11? And yet, it doesn't show that. In 09, less than 1 opposing player was injured during a game with the Saints when the league average was right at 2 per game. In 2010 and 11, they were statistically average in the NFL when the numbers were crunched. So, while maybe not as injurious as initially thought, it was still shocking to learn about this shadowy side of professional football on this date in 2012. On this day in 1962, Wilt Chamberlain scored 100 points in an NBA game as the Philadelphia Warriors beat the New York Knicks 169-147. Wilt had 41 at halftime, which was not that unusual for him that season since he typically scored in the mid-30s through the first 2 quarters. It wasn't until they were about to go back out to play the second half that Phillies coaches decided to let Wilt loose and see just how many he could score. He had 69 through 3, and with 8 minutes to play, still needed 25 to get to 100. All team play went out the window, and every player was intent on getting Wilt the ball. With 43 seconds left in the game, Chamberlain hit his final bucket, giving him triple digits for the game. And time now for That's Got Nothing to Do with Sports fun fact. Hippo sweat is red. Well, scientists actually don't call it sweat because the secretion is not for cooling. Instead, the red sweat is for moisturizing the animal's skin and repelling water. This has been an original Thrive Suite production.